All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhodes, and Lou Bryson, plus special guest Tom Johnson of the Aroma Academy. I'm sure now you're putting together the connection between Aroma and this week's music selection, courtesy of one Martin Duffy. Real quick, before I turn things over to your host, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co and want to point out a couple of ways you can interact with them throughout the live stream today. So to your right, you'll see a chat. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. At the bottom, you'll see a button that says Ask a Question. If you have any questions for Tom or our hosts throughout the presentation, just click that button and enter your question in there. We'll be watching for it. And last but not least, you'll see a share button at the top right. Feel free to click that and invite your friends to come and join us. But with all that said, I will turn things over to your host now.
Woohoo! Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy, and I am a former senior master of whiskey, many years. Former Team brand ambassador. Woohoo! 18 glorious months. And then former co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, and celebrating 6 years as the North American brand representative for Glencairn Crystal, right here. Lizard.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhodes, technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage across a variety of substrates and products, including beer, rum, vodka, but my specialty being whiskey. I spent most of my career at a company called Diageo, but now am founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting.
And for hire.
That's right.
That's the rumor. That's the rumor out there.
If you'd like to learn more about my company, actually, there's a link to my website in the About the Host section. And I think Lou is trying to refresh. I think he's having some technical issues over there.
Refreshing.
Yeah, he's refreshing.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope he's not refreshing too much that way. Come back, Lou. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I think everyone knows Mr. Lou Bryson, a whiskey writer, an author, 20 years, the editor of Whiskey, Whiskey Magazine. This is his latest tome, available on Amazon and a bookstore near you. Today, our guest, or I should say this week, our guest is a man who is known for smelling a lot. He smells. And the thing is, he smells good. That's the whole thing. He's a writer himself. Writes about whiskey, but writes about other eclectic things. But he is probably best known in the industry as the co-founder of Aroma Academy USA. Mr. Tom Johnson, everybody.
Hi, Marty. Hi, Liz.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, little fella. Where are you? You down in Louisville?
I am in Louisville.
They've gotten rid of the Louis. It's a lot less.
You're supposed to sort of swallow in the middle of it and say Louisville.
Marbles, right?
And I'm rebelling against that.
Well, the whole kind of Kentucky thing. I mean, you got... you don't say Marseille, you say Marcel or something like that? Marcel's. Yeah.
I like my favorite little Kentucky linguistic quirk is when you buy a couple of dressers and a mirror and a bed for your bedroom. That's not called the bedroom suite. That's called the bedroom suit.
Wow. It must be really uncomfortable to wear it.
It's difficult for me to cope with.
Yeah. So, Tom, we always ask, and I always find this one of the most fascinating things is, because it is a path, it is a journey that you've gone on. Where did you start from, and how did you get to the Aroma Academy? And I explain too, also, what the Aroma Academy is.
Well, the Aroma Academy is based in Scotland. It started a couple of guys in the perfume business who like to drink scotch. And because it is always easier to work really hard on something that's not your job. They spent much of their time developing a set of distinct aromas for Scotch, identifying and chemically creating those aromas. And they decided there might be a business there, and so they've done Scotch, wine, gin, bourbon, rum, and there's a false kit that has the false kit that can show up in spirits and wine, and what they indicate about.
Never thought about doing one for human corpses? Really good for some of the CSI guys.
That's and you know, that's of course one of the reasons why we don't let Marty talk to research and development. We got a tequila one in process right now.
Oh, cool.
Actually agave based spirits. And we have an online training thing that is going to use a smaller, very specific set of aromas, 18, and then will be a training thing that you go through on the web.
Tom, so here's the Aroma Academy USA. It starts off in Scotland, and I used to see the folks from the UK come over all the time, but you and a partner started this up how many years ago, and how did it developed?
I think it's been about 5 years ago. I spent much of my career doing entrepreneurial ventures, and I have a good friend who is the same way, and we've done a couple of startups together, and just by happenstance, we sort of found ourselves unemployed at the same time. And he read about the Aroma Academy in a magazine, and we decided to contact them and see if they had anybody doing work for them in the United States, and they didn't. And that's the sort of unglamorous tale of how we got into it. It is, for me, something that has really captured my imagination. Aroma is a fascinating subject. It's very nerdy, scientific, and I really like that. And it's also hooked into, obviously, all the cultural stuff that goes along with whiskey, which is one of the reasons we like whiskey so much, is because it's not just this thing in a glass. It's attached to so much else of our civilization. And so all of that is kind of a ball of stuff that I really, really have gotten kind of obsessed with. Yeah.
So you, myself, and Lou were doing these aroma classes at whiskey events for about a year and a half. And I did some research on my own, and I thought I read once where the sense of smell was the first sense to be developed by any living creature, like an amoeba or something. Actually developed a sense of smell even before a sense of touch.
Yes, but the sense of smell as we have it and as we understand it is immensely more complicated. The sense of smell that is theorized to have been the original sense is just the ability to sense certain chemicals in the surrounding fluid, whether it's air or water, that would carry meaning to the creature.
Right.
Could mean food, could mean run, could mean something. But and it's so rudimentary. It's almost like an instinct at that stage. There's no consciousness to grasp the stimulation and understand the stimulation and do something with it, which is what we have, which is one of the reasons why whiskey is so cool, because you have this whole sort of process you go through.
Now, your background, though, before you got into the Aroma Academy, did you have any background in the whiskey industry, or in the aroma? I mean, did you work at a Cinnabon store or something? I mean, why did that attract you to it?
I made military and aviation documentaries. And then I worked on a succession of startups, and the last job that I had, which when I walked out of it, I said, okay, this is the last job I'm ever going to have. I'm going to go do something that interests me, was for a startup genetics laboratory. I did the communications piece for that. So no, I didn't have any but recreational experience with whiskey. I had studied wine.
Okay. Well,
and I used to as a hobby, even when I was working, I used to write about wine.
Here's a question for you and Liz. I was thinking about this today, thinking about today's episode, and I used to date this Filipino nurse. It's not.
That's one of those.
There we go.
Might not be the best way to start opening a topic.
No wonder Lou left.
She told me that she could smell the inside of her nose. Now, she was a medical person. I've never heard that. And when she tried to show me, all it looked like was that she was staring at her nose and then breathing in. Is it possible to smell the inside of your nose? And actually, how do you differentiate the inside of your nose from any aromas that you're smelling? That's like hearing the inside of your ear.
With the proviso that the sense of smell is incredibly personal, because for reasons we may or may not get into, but because of the way the sense is constructed, it's incredibly subjective and filled with coincidences. And given the idea that perhaps her nose has a smell, which I don't know about.
I never used one.
I would still be doubtful about it, because one of the things that your brain does, your sense of smell is a warning sense, and it's an attracting sense. It's your radar that gives you an idea that there is something within a certain range of your presence. And because of that, one of the things your brain does is, if there's a smell that's there all the time, it cancels it out.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
There's no news value in that. It's not capable of warning you of anything. It doesn't tell you anything you don't already know. So even if her nose did have a smell,
it's such a weird topic.
It is, but that's okay. I like that. The brain would adjust and cancel it out, and so what she is. I mean, if I had to guess, and I'm only guessing, and I'm not discounting at all her experience, clearly, I mean, she's either lying to you and having fun with you, which I'm totally in favor of.
She was a little nuts.
Or she's having a real experience and just sort of miscategorizing it.
She thought it was real.
We in the smell business talk about the organoleptic experience, which is the whole thing of feel and taste and smell and everything all together. She might be having an organoleptic experience that has more to do with sort of dryness of the skin or something like that is registering. Senses sometimes fuse together.
So what you got, Liz?
Yeah, I was just going to build on what Tom said. So I mean, to his point about your olfactory sort of adjusting to an aroma that it's sensing, it's the same reason why, when we're doing professional sensory analysis, where we talk about the bunny sniff, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that short burst, two to three, short little sniffs versus after a large inhalation or a large detection after, 2 to 3 seconds. Then that's exactly, what Tom was mentioning, is your brain and sort of adjust to that aroma and no longer can, evaluate in its true form. So from that perspective, what Tom said, if it's in your nose all the time,
right,
then by that logic, that doesn't make sense.
There's the thing too. If you're chewing gum and you feel the gum, you've lost the flavor in gum. You actually haven't. The gum hasn't lost the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It's
You've
just
adjusted.
you've adjusted to it. So if you actually take the gum out for a few minutes, then chew it again, you'll find out, oh, the flavor's still there. It's actually still sweet.
And
have you conducted that experiment, Marty, yourself?
Actually, I was at a bar event in Northern Ireland where that's the thing.
So you found the gum at the bottom of the bar top?
I didn't find random gum. It was my gum.
It took it off the bottom of the table.
It was actually 8th grade, and I found it underneath the desk.
Yeah. Juicy fruit.
Gum's so good. Beech nut.
There's a couple of lessons in this for people when they consider tasting. One of which is don't overwhelm your and Lou's keep an account on this, your olfactory epithelium.
Is that the first one?
That's the first one.
Yeah, welcome back.
Which is a little postage stamp sized thing at the top of your sinuses that's got all the nerve endings and receptors that detect the chemicals that make up a smell. And it's very easy to just plug those up. So you're going to want to pace yourself. Liz talked about bunny sniff. That's exactly what we say. Inhale, little short, inhale, 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 exhale. Give yourself a little bit of a break. And one of the reasons it's good to spend time with whiskey and not just do a quick 30-second assessment and then on to the next one is not just for the consideration process, but also just to give your nose a break. Back when I used to write about wine, I used to go to big wine tastings, and I was at a tasting of, I think it was 3-year vertical of 24 different Napa Chardonnays.
Oh, wow.
And I could do about 6, and I'd have to go outside and rest my nose. I mean, it's just my palate. And some people have an alligator skin palate, and they can just go and go and go. But for most people, you sort of start to burn out. You definitely start to lose nuance.
Well,
so how do you?
Oh,
sorry. You mentioned kind of taking a break and getting your olfactory back up and ready for analysis. Do you have any tips or tricks that you do personally,
well,
Tom?
Going back to what we said earlier about your nose canceling out smells that are around you all the time. You have a smell. You know, when you meet a new dog, the dog comes up and smells you all over and gets information from that. You have a smell. You don't smell it because you smell it all the time. So a good way to sort of recharge is to just don't sniff your hand, sniff up on your arm. Your hand will have like soap smells and things on it, but just go up and smell yourself a couple of times. And that kind of resets it.
That's why I keep the ponytail.
Wait a minute! All of a sudden, you're smelling herbal essence. Wait a minute!
But you got to take long sniffs and readjust. That's
when you do that, you're not taking bunny sniffs. You're taking a big. It's like flushing out a sink. You just let the water flow.
Okay.
The first time I saw somebody doing that in a tasting, it freaked me right out. They're just snorting the inside of their elbow. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Well, some people do coffee.
About like that.
and I've been to distilleries where they're doing tastings. They have coffee grounds.
Or vanilla beans. I've seen vanilla beans used.
Well, vanilla beans would be difficult because vanilla is such a. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that it does start to cancel out the vanilla, which is so dominant in bourbon that you start to be able to pick up the other things.
Yeah, you know what?
I would.
This was actually mostly with Scotch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would say with you know, we advocate smelling your forearm. We're ambivalent on
other parts of your body,
but we would be radically against vanilla beans.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to smell other parts of your body, though, right?
Well,
right, you will limit it to your arm. Just trying to
Marty,
clear things up. Yeah.
I would like to physically see you physically smell other parts of your body.
I was going to
challenge
say
you.
logistics. Logistics.
Stick around, everyone, to
Later.
the end of this.
Later.
I'll tell you, former contortionist.
For that whiskey yoga class. I've been
Actually,
doing
that would be great. The whiskey
is-
yoga class.
So one of the reasons the sense of smell is, I can go up to somebody on the street and say, "Hey, you're looking great," and it's just a kind of nice thing to say. If you go up to somebody and you tell them, "Gosh, you smell good," there's a creepy quality to that. And one of the reasons for that is that the sense of smell is the only smell that's tied into the whole brain. Because of that, it's very intimate. It triggers very deep memories. The visceral kind of memories that are there. You almost can't even put a finger on them. You just know. How many times have you had somebody smell something and say, "That smells like, ooh, I can't quite get it. I can't quite get it." They're into deep psychology at that point, trying to find the thing to attach to that.
Right. Well, that's why, flavor wheels. And not so much even, I mean, there's aroma wheels. I've seen these made especially for gin. I think are great for folks because it's not, and not everyone, you mentioned Sultana to most people. They're not even going to know what the fuck that is. Freak that is.
That's from Aladdin. That was the guy who ruled the country.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Hello, big Sultana.
It smells like Disney. I don't know.
Actually, in Disney, it could have been.
But also too, Tom. I don't know, and Liz, you could, and possibly Lou, you could talk about this. I know in Scotland, master blenders will cut the whiskey with down to about 20-30%, and nose though only about maybe up to 40 whiskeys a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's a full day.
Yeah,
because
that's a lot.
Yeah, their nose will just get exhausted. It will by the end of the day. And actually, Lou, I know you've done judgings. Liz, you've done judgings too, haven't you? At the end of the day, it's like your nose has done push-ups and it's just wrecked.
Well, Buffalo Trace has done an enormous amount of research on different aspects of aromas and people's perception of aromas. And one of the things they came down on is that if you really want to do your best job of sensory analysis, you want about 20% alcohol.
Yeah.
So if it's an 80 proof bourbon, cut it 1-to-1.
20%, yeah, is pretty standard.
And how many, Liz, how many whiskeys would an American blender use, do you think?
I mean, I'm not sure I can provide a quantifiable number there, but
Anecdotal? No.
Like typically in a set, at least, if you're comparing, I mean, I would say 5 or 6 for a set is about the max in terms of trying to compare it back to a control. For example, if you have a blend standard and maybe you're making tweaks, or maybe it's a new year, so you have new barrels coming of age, that sort of thing where you're comparing it back to a control. Anything more than, I would say, like 6 in that set is probably you're going to get some fatigue.
And Tom, you're talking about the personal aroma that we have. Now, I know I talked to Lou about this once, about a particular friend of ours who does a lot of judging, and he once told me he will not bathe for a couple days and not brush his teeth because he doesn't want it getting involved in nosing and tasting. I'm like, well, dude, you're going to have your own overpowering stench.
Yeah, for everyone else at the table.
Right.
Everybody else standing around you is going to say, that smells like funk.
Yeah.
I would suggest that has to do with something other than mere connoisseurship.
Well, he says it's intentional for that, not because he just has a BO. He says he does that for that particular reason. I thought, Dude, do you
But
realize?
they make unscented products.
Right.
There's always just water.
Yeah, and there's mouthwash that actually doesn't have flavor, but it has it breaks down sulfurs in your mouth to eliminate bad breath. But no flavor.
But by that logic, you wouldn't eat or drink anything else for that whole 2-day incubation period or whatever you mentioned.
I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a blender, and she said,
"Oh, an actual person, you mean?"
Yeah,
I thought maybe you meant the election.
Not with the appliance. Yeah, with an actual person who was a blender for a reputable firm, and we were talking about all the little knobs and dials you have to throw when you're distilling and blending whiskey, and all the different things you can have that have an effect on the experience of the whiskey. And one of the things she said is that people worry a lot too much about that because there are a lot of things you do that just won't make a difference to the end product and won't make a difference to they make a technical difference. And I would argue that somebody who doesn't bathe because they don't want to bring any sort of perfume memory to a tasting is probably gone from the realm of the real to the realm of the abstract in a really disturbing way.
I think it's just part of whiskey geekdom where they think I am so on top of this.
Well, and we're all
method acting or something.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like when Dustin Hoffman didn't sleep for a week because of to do Marathon Man, and Laurence Olivier said, "Why don't you just act tired?"
Well, what is there are things that have a theoretical effect, and we have gotten to the point with technology where we can measure incredibly small differences between things. And the question becomes on the other end of it, is that small difference that we can prove in a laboratory a difference that is discernible by the end user? And I would suggest it's not most of the time.
Something when I was researching, asking impertinent questions for the book, the latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, one of the things Harlan Wheatley at Buffalo Trace said, as we said, thank you, Liz. Buffalo Trace does a lot of research on this stuff. They collect a lot of data. I mean, they did the single oak project where they were just making barrels from one tree. And Harlan said after a certain point, what you're really looking for is kind of uniform chaos because you can't control every single little thing. So what you want to do is try to control like the frame inside which a certain amount of chaos takes place. And I think that works with on the other end, on our end as well. There's only so much you can do to eliminate other stimuli. If you're judging with a group of people, almost inevitably, at least one of those people is going to have a habit or an aroma or a sound they make that is going to just, there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
Just do your best and cut the bullshit and move on.
There's a bar here in Chicago that I told them about this other bar that had really nice soap in their washrooms. I mean, it was lavender soap or something. I just thought, wow, I really like that smell of that soap. And I walked out and you go, oh man, that's so wrong. Because then you can't really enjoy and nose your whiskey here at the bar if that were the case. And I go, dude, you have a giant food window, not more than 15 feet away from here. Do you think this is a nosing room? Do you think this is
a controlled environment?
How about the guy next to me who had Mexican food the day before? I mean, you don't think there's other aromas in the air right now?
Well, and it's not just aromas; it's other things as well. You
like barking dogs.
Sounds, yeah.
That's Rizzo. Rizzo's pissed because we took her to the vet yesterday.
Rizzo. Do you have the rest of the cast of Grease over there too?
Cubbies.
Cubbies. Socks.
But you also, when you're doing sort of optimal tasting, you don't want to do it under laboratory grade fluorescent lights. You want to have a lower level of light. You certainly don't want a lot of noise, because your brain is a little bit like a reducing valve, and it can only take in so much information at a time. And if you have something obnoxious, like a dog, who's forcing its way into your awareness, it's going to detract from the other senses.
So what do you think about music then, Tom? I know it's getting off the whole sense of smell and onto the sense of hearing, but they've paired music to different whiskeys, different styles of whiskey.
And lighting.
And lighting.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think we're getting a little bit into the realm of the theoretical.
Yeah, it's starting to sound a little new agey to me.
Although, you know,
Got some sad.
when I'm tasting whiskey, and I don't do whiskey reviews. So when I taste whiskey in an organized way, it's to some other purpose. It's to identify a quality by comparative tastings.
Don't move into Lou's neighborhood, buddy. That's Lou's neighborhood.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just looking out for Fred.
Yeah.
Fred has his own planet.
I know, but I get paid to be the defenses. You know.
I usually have music playing. It's not jarring, attention grabbing music. It'll be, it's.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a problem with my affection for Frank Sinatra, and I'll have some Sinatra in the background or Dave Brubeck or something like that.
Oh no. Yeah, no, it's great.
So,
I can handle a background. I can't do headphones, for example.
No.
Headphones would be too invasive. So I agree.
Yeah.
I've worn headphones.
I found the headphones to be like a magic tool for me.
Really?
Yeah, and here's the weird thing. I finally spent the money and got the noise canceling cans, and I'm thinking, this is going to be it. And it drove me crazy. I couldn't focus on anything. I just kept looking around thinking, is someone
What's
saying
happening?
something? Did somebody? Yes!
Well,
So finally, I put some just like really low classical guitar music on, and I was in the zone. I was just
cutting out your sense of the sound around you is. I mean, even wearing these, it bothers me just because
Yeah, my wife won't wear them.
What if one of my arch enemies is sneaking up behind me and I can't hear him? And
see, that's why you need this camera thing on all the time.
I have them.
So you can
all
see
over.
behind
Fighting sense.
You guys don't see it, but I'm seeing multi-views of my estate.
Well, I have a friend in the wine business who swears by the kind of ambient music that Brian Eno does.
Oh, I love Brian Eno. Yeah, it's great.
That's his zone. That puts him. And eventually, when you find something and then you do it repetitively, it kind of becomes a trigger for you to know it's time to do this thing. And so it becomes self-reinforcing, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's not a bad thing at all.
Well, it's also like setting the mood, just like when you drink wine and you light candles and you dim the lights and you get the whole romantic mood. But this is more like I'm romancing me right now.
He's talking about a date, not staying home by himself.
So
I'm talking about staying home by myself.
So what we're talking about is the analytical versus experiential piece that is
science talk
of sensory analysis and aroma detection. I think, something that I thought was you kind of hit home while we were prepping for today's session was the emphasis on the psychological component. And you mentioned this earlier, is the association with memories. So is that something for you, I guess, when you guys are doing trainings and that sort of thing, where you really are focused on, here's this aroma capsule, it's this, you're wrong, or how does that work? Or, is it more for you guys about going to the consumer, whomever is being, trained on these to say, yeah, that's grandma's house, and this is why.
There's a thing that has happened during the time when I've been doing this, which is that I have moved a little bit from with the goal of having people enjoy whiskey more. I have moved from doing a lot of technical stuff like here's proper sniffing technique, here's that. People are pretty sophisticated. They mostly know that stuff. To almost running like a therapy session where because aromas are complex sets of chemicals at different ratios that your brain translates into actually a single thing. It's actually a spatial perception, but just think of it as a number, as getting down to one number, and then it goes and looks for things that are close to that number in your memories. So there's a number or a set of numbers that are real close together that every time you've done it, there's been an orange in front of you, or you've been drinking orange juice or stuff. And so that turns that set of chemicals into orange. You're not born with a perception of orange. That's a learned perception, and all of them are learned, and all of them are cultural. There are things that smell good to Americans that don't smell good to people in Thailand. Americans have that problem every time we go anywhere overseas. It always smells bad to us, and it's not that it smells bad. It's we're judgmental. So because of that, you get. I try to teach people to trust their perceptions. To when they first bring a glass of whiskey to their nose and they smell something, remember that first perception, and trust it. And we had a woman who was absolutely dead solid, perfect. Sure, she smelled caramel. We had a caramel essence for her, and she was absolutely certain that she was smelling walnuts.
Oh, yeah.
And that was interesting because we get caramel mixed up with butterscotch and brown sugar and candy things like that. But walnuts were a whole new thing. So we sort of drilled down into that and found out that and this was not what she was thinking when she said that, but we found out that when she was a kid, her favorite candy had been turtles, which is caramel and walnuts. So those two things were tangled up for her. And so what we all have things like that. We have grandma's cookies. What are grandma cookies? This smells just like my grandmother's cookies. That tells you absolutely nothing. But if I can take that and say, okay, grandma's cookies are ginger, burnt sugar, some vanilla, butter, then every time I have that association come up, I can start to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, there's ginger, there's. And that's one of the things that our kits do is they give referential pure essences, defined things, so that you can start to pull those hairballs apart a little bit.
So that's like an aroma wheel, but you start off with something personal and then you break it down.
Right. And the aroma wheel is an excellent tool, and it's an excellent process and we get people working on this. We get them to say, okay, what do you smell? Don't tell me the little tiny thing that you smell. Do you smell fruit?
Yeah.
Do you smell candy? Do you smell anything that's sort of woody or vegetal? Get that. And that's the inner part of the aroma wheel.
Right.
So then capture that. Then say, okay, you smell candy. Is it like a sugary candy? Is it like a chocolate candy? Is it like a vanilla? And sort of start drilling down into it. So that you're not making big decisions. You're not making, I'm going to decide one of 14 things. You're deciding one of 5. Is it candy? Is it wood? Is it vegetal? Is it spicy? Is it, so you got to pick one of 5. So you pick one of 5. Then there's 4 sub things of that. And then you've got just a couple on the far end of it to choose from. And that's more in my world, which Liz operates in a professional world that's a little bit beyond my scope or capabilities. But in my world, that's what passes for analytical tasting for us, is to just take that walk down from the basics. And every now and then something from the far end jumps right out at you.
Well, I
Grandma's
think
cookies.
that way too is a good way to get folks. I mean, I did staff trainings at bars and restaurants, both here and over in Ireland, where something they never did before. And so the whole idea, the best connection, the best association they can make with it is a wine tasting, where someone's coming up with all these rare fruits and different aromas that, again, they probably never experienced themselves. So start with something personal, break it down, and then lead you to, then you can it helps you describe it to your customer or to someone else, or if you're a writer or a judge. But start with something it's the basic of almost everything in life, right? Start with something and then head out from there.
Tom, on the trusting your nose thing, when we were doing our sound check yesterday, and I've heard you tell the story before, you had a story about an art evaluator, an art historian.
There was a guy named Thomas Hoving who was the director, who ended his career as the director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And when he was I think he retired in the 1970s sometime. But when he was young, he was somebody who, for the Metropolitan Museum, traveled around assessing artwork that people were offering to the museum for sale. And this was in the immediate aftermath of World War II. So there was all kinds of stolen art out floating around. And the Met didn't really care if it was stolen or not, but they just wanted to make sure it was real. So Hoving would sometimes go into these very spooky, blindfold them, take them somewhere, situations where he would assess art. And he carried a little piece of paper in his palm and a pen. And whenever he saw a piece of art for the first time, he wrote down whatever the first word was that came to his mind. And he said in 20 years of doing acquisitions, he was never wrong once. That first word was always, now it built and got more complicated and stuff like that. But one of the stories that's told is about a very complicated and piece of carved ivory that had all kinds of signs that would say it was fraudulent. And when he looked at it first, what he wrote down was "no doubt." And for years, he was the only person who believed that piece of work was legitimate. And finally, they did prove it. But it was that first impression that when it's all like. And the lesson for that in tasting is we have these screens up of what smart tasters sound like. We know what critics sound like. We know what reviews sound like. We know all of that. And part of the therapy that I do in my training is I tell you to just put that aside and trust what you trust. If you smell your grandmother's cookies, you smell your grandmother's cookies, and trust and really listen to that first impression. Really listen to it, because it's not going to be deep. It's not going to have total knowledge in it, but it'll have something that is way probably true and way probably real that you can start to build off of.
Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to build on that. And I had a question on, so when we're talking, some things have negative connotations, some things have positive connotations from a psychological memory perspective. This is a not serious question, but the whole smell versus scent, or smell versus aroma. Because again, lovely intro music. I really enjoyed it, Marty. So great selection. But for me, always, I've been taught that, we're not smelling something, we're, detecting an aroma, because smell, I think when you think about it, has a negative connotation. We're like, oh, like that guy smells, or,
Yeah, but Liz, we all smell. We all smell. It's actually a great equalizer.
And can I stand in this conversation? Can I stand up for the word stench?
You can stand up all you want.
I'm tired of the negative connotations of stench.
Okay.
Are you
We need to
being
reclaim
serious here? Or are you being tough?
No, I'm
Elaborate.
not being serious at all.
Oh,
This
Big
vernacular is getting.
No, Liz,
big sign out on your lawn. I'm up for stench.
Liz has wandered into a neighborhood where I'm very familiar with. I was an English major, and as an adult, I'm now a pedant. So word usage. I mean, she's right. When you talk about something smells, you're not saying, "Hey, that's delightful."
Yeah.
You know, and
No,
aroma is much
unless
softer, it's much smoother.
Unless you follow the word with the word delightful, that smells delightful.
Well, yes.
See?
Then it's a verb and not a noun.
Outfoxed again, Johnson. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's a verb and not a noun. As a verb, you're okay. It's when it becomes a noun that it gets to be a problem.
What is that smell? It's
I've
delightful.
stepped into writer territory.
Yeah.
Here we go.
This is the part where people find
smell.
other place to be.
It's the context.
Yeah.
What you put with it.
What is the science of? I mean, it's not aromatherapy. Aromatherapy is some kind of new age thing. What is the science of smelling, or the study of smells, or study of scents?
People are olfactory scientists.
That's it, huh? They don't have
Sensory analysis.
something with ology at the end of it. No?
Most of them are chemists of one sort or another.
There you go. Okay.
But there's an overlap. There's an overlap with psychology, and there are people who would argue that there's also an overlap with some sort of cultural anthropology.
And
Because
statistics.
there really is no reason. There's no objective reason why we can say one whiskey is good and one whiskey is not good. All of those responses are learned. All of them are cultural.
No, whiskey that smells like poo is whiskey that smells like poo.
And that's something that smells versus scent.
Lou, don't be giving anybody any ideas out there.
Oh, it's too late. That cat's way out of the bag.
All right, Thomas, you guys have captured little aromas into little tiny bottles. I want to know how you do this. Is this some kind of weird magic?
Well, our guys are really specific about how they do them. You do the analytical side and you say, okay, here's next time that dog won't be anywhere to be found.
Tom's going to off his own dog.
You smell that dog?
You start with the and this is actually a process that Buffalo Trace did a few years ago that was really interesting. But you start with
everything.
What do you start with? What do you smell? You smell caramel. Okay, you smell caramel. Okay, what are the chemicals that contribute to that smell? And there's a conceit that sort of this chemical corresponds to this smell, but most smells are softened around the edges by being a variety of chemicals together. So you sort of identify what those are and what percentages to get to the desired thing. And then you take those molecules and you suspend them in a solution. And it's usually alcohol. Sometimes it's water, depending on the nature of the chemicals. And the advantage of doing it that way, the way that we do it, is we all know when you leave a drink out in the air, it changes over time. And when you use our little sniffing strips that you use and you put them down, it will smell different 2 minutes from now than it does now. It will smell and some aromas will be gone in a minute, and some aromas will get stronger and be there the next day. And that's the behavior. That's the behavior of the molecules. That's and it's why if you put a glass of bourbon out, because the molecules behave differently. If you put a glass of bourbon out and you let it sit for 3 days, and you come back and you can still smell caramel and vanilla, because those are not volatile chemicals that waft away. You will never do that and smell any sort of florals or any of those delightful light things, because those are very volatile chemicals, and they they fly off of the liquid very quickly.
And
How do you get decay? I mean, what exactly decayed to get decay?
The smell of decay, whether it is plant or animal decay, has in common certain chemicals. Now we should point out that's from the False kit. That's not, if you buy a bourbon kit, you don't get decay.
This isn't the False kit.
Is that the whiskey kit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sir. Yeah.
Well, that's because Scotch has some interesting attributes. I wanted a bottle called Band-Aid, but they called it something else.
Oh, yeah, liquid Band-Aid.
Which I love.
It's the smell of carbon-based tissues, whether plant or animal, breaking down.
Really? So almost everything.
Our guys had to smell that for several months while they were developing the chemical.
Wow, you stink. Louis, you want to talk about the rye versus bourbon, since Tom wrote an article about this. Lou, are you talking?
Yeah, I'm working on. Hang on. Sorry.
I like this. I like the plane landing on your head.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, while Lou's coming back to us, I was just going to point out the comment about volatility. And that's another, back to your comment earlier, Tom, about, taking small sniffs, coming back. So, I mean, as you're exposing, as you're opening up your top here to release some of those volatiles in the headspace, could be potentially different each time, because some of the more volatile compounds will be evolving out.
Yeah, the ratios in the compound in the air will change.
Yeah.
You should always, when you pour whiskey out of the bottle, you should always sniff it very quickly and get your nose in there fast, so you get that fresh out of the bottle. You'll find the florals, you'll find some of the citrusy stuff in that, and you won't find it 10 minutes later. When people do tastings and they pour the whiskey an hour ahead of time,
yeah,
it's still going to be good whiskey, but they're going to lose some stuff.
That's right. Yeah,
you lose a lot of the genie out of the bottle, I like to say.
Yeah, and you can buy these little glass things on Amazon for like
watch covers, we call them.
Yeah,
it's in the glass business. We call them
$4 for a dozen, and you just sit them on the glass like that, and then you take them off and you sniff, put it back on. Like Liz said, it allows stuff to build up a little bit and preserves those more volatile aromas.
Also, too, I mean, a lot of folks should also take note. I mean, when you seal up a bottle of whiskey, it's never 100% going to be totally sealed. So even if it's a cork or the screw top, and actually I think they said screw tops are actually a little more reliable as far as keeping a better seal. But if you see an old bottle of whiskey and the whiskey is already evaporated down to, there's a sealed bottle down to the shoulders, you're going to get a much different whiskey than was originally put in that bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And same for a half-empty bottle, too.
Yeah, and although whiskey is obviously much more solid about that than wine, you do get it. And you have the really obsessive among us have little cans of nitrogen, and we close up a bottle for a while. We fill it with nitrogen and close it up so it doesn't oxidize any. And that's not something I would advocate necessarily for everybody, but if you've got rare bottles that you're going to keep 2 fingers of whiskey in for a while and don't want them to deteriorate, you might want to consider that.
How come Lou kind of reminds me of Harry Scher's character in Spinal Tap? And I'm expecting him to get the camera down just perfect right at the end of the show. Just like Harry Scher got stuck in the pod. Go ahead.
So the other thing I think you mentioned was around, thresholds and concentration of a component. So I always think of, I feel like ethyl acetate is a key example because it's one of the most prominent esters in whiskey and alcoholic beverages. And at small amounts, smaller doses, you think of, oh, this is a nice fruit cocktail, sort of, maybe pair like light fruity. But in very large concentrations, it's, oh, this smells like a Sharpie or magic marker.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to note that, and I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit ago, and just wanted to kind of close the loop on that.
And there are chemicals, lots of chemicals that are like that. There's a chemical, and I'm old, the name escapes me right now, but in lower concentration, it's kind of green wood, and when you get in the same chemical in higher concentrations is coconut.
Yeah,
it's one of the lactones.
Whiskey lactone.
Yeah. And there's lots like that. It's immensely complicated, and that's one of the reasons why your brain doesn't try to deal with it as individual things. It tries to bundle them into familiar packages that mean orange, that mean banana, that mean, spice, whatever. Your brain can process all the taste senses at once. When you have salted caramel, you taste both the caramel and the salt. You don't taste one thing. But the sense of smell can't do that. There are too many variables. You have more than 1,000 different receptors in your nose for 1,000 different chemicals. And then you put in concentrations, the concentration factor on that, and you really have an infinite number of smells that.
Yeah, and synergies.
And so you have to bundle that together. You have to, and
Tom, do you believe that the receptors, I think we had this discussion once upon a time, I believe, that back in primitive days when men would go out hunting, they might have had a more astute, keener sense of smell, just as to protect themselves out in the fields. And that we've lost a lot of that, because nowadays too, most people don't even pay attention to their sense of smell,
unless something really harsh breaks through.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's something that has to almost hit them over the head. But you don't have, unlike a rabbit. I mean, isn't a rabbit? It's something like humans have about 5 million receptors. A dog would have about 90 million. Or 100 million, but a rabbit has like 500 million receptors. Yeah. And that's why a rabbit will run away from you, even if you're 3 lawns away from it and you have an axe.
I have noticed, however, that I'm extremely sensitive to anything smoky or hot, like hot electrics or
like in the area toaster. Like within the area that you're sitting or that you're at. I mean,
anytime I'm moving through something, that's the thing that grabs my attention quickly. Sometimes it's somebody got a piece of toast out from a bag, and that kind of thing. I mean, I think there are certain smells that we're very sensitive to.
Oh yeah,
there are 2 factors in that though, and first you've got to consider genetics. 3% of the human genetic code has to do with the sensory receptors for the sense of smell, which is a huge chunk of the, I think your eyesight only takes up less than 1%. So, I mean, it's just an enormous quantity of genetic information and genetic potential variability. So you've got that. Some people, and the obvious example that people use is cilantro. Some people, it just tastes like fresh stuff. And some people, it's just like, 3-in-1 oil. I mean,
it tastes like milled aluminum or something to me.
Yeah,
it's awful.
I mean, and that's a pure genetic identifiable difference. And then the other aspect of this is learned. Like any other sense, we are attuned to the things that we've encountered before in particularly memorable ways. If it's grandma's cookie, it's a very positive memory. But if your alarms all go off at the slightest whiff of smoke, I don't know. Were you in a fire? Did you get burned? I mean, it could just be a coincidence. But in a lot of cases, we're sensitive to things. And one of the things they do in big companies like Brown-Forman with their tasting panels is they identify the things that people are hypersensitive to or immune to. And it's not disqualifying because they want a broad range of people, but they just keep that in mind as they filter the information that comes out of them. That when Joe says he doesn't smell any spice, that's because Joe never smells any spice.
Yeah, sensitivities.
Poor Joe. What's the matter with Joe?
Metallic is
Not a
one of
spicy
those aromas that I think people can be really sensitive to or not, hardly detected at all.
Plus, they're a great heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you should know that about yourself. That should be part of your journey of understanding whiskey, is understanding yourself and how you relate to it and how you understand it. And that will have something to do with what kind of whiskey you like on the back end, is the stuff that has those qualities. And in wine, I'm particularly sensitive to a kind of volatile acidity that just is horrible to me. And it shows up in Pinot Noirs a lot. And people can be drinking a perfectly delightful Pinot Noir, and it's just like drinking vinegar for me. I can't do it. And I haven't identified any sensitivities like that in whiskey. But you should be aware of that. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to be embarrassed about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
I have an extremely high threshold for diacetyl. I learned that from tasting beer. It's a big deal in beer. It's a flaw. So, but it's got to be sky high for me to even notice it.
Hey, kids, we are now out of time.
That Tom. Jeez.
Thomas, yeah, I know. Oh my God. How can someone who's all about smelling talk so much? It's like
Todd McCoy had a comment. So I always like using the examples from Lou's tasting whiskey.
Oh my God, that tasted whiskey. Yeah, it's right
When
here.
he talked about finally tasting fudge and the Parker Beam anecdote about tasting corn and oak instead of leather and mangoes really helps people feel more comfortable identifying what they smell and taste in whiskey.
Yeah, Lou got that from me, I'm sure. I think I just mentioned it.
Yeah, you and Jim Murray.
Me and Jim Murray. Palling around. Thomas, want to thank you.
My pleasure.
For joining us. You left a bit of a stink bomb of knowledge. That's how I like to think of it. How does anyone, people want you to come and talk to them? Do you do presentations for distributors, distillers, things like that?
I do. The website for if you're interested in the educational materials that we sell, the website is uptosniff.com.
Below.
And we're also on Amazon, so you can just search Amazon for Aroma Academy.
And Up to Sniff, it's about his Aroma Academy, all right? No one be contacting him about illegal stuff.
And I can be found at
the local bar.
You can send me an email if you want to at johnson.tomj@gmail.com.
All right, sweet. Ooh, thank you.
What are you guys drinking before we jump off here?
I'm actually drinking Writer's Tears. They sent me this neat little book thing. It's a connection to Ulysses. But what's really cool is they sent a bar of soap from Sweeney's Pharmacy, which is in Ulysses, and I did bathe with it today. It's a nice lemon-scented soap.
Wow!
It brings out the lemony bit in the whiskey. It's so.
That's nuts. A fun little bit. I don't think I forgot to ask Fiona and O'Connor when he was on a couple of weeks ago. Great little bit, and having to do with James Joyce, and also Finnegan's Wake, the song. Are you familiar with the Irish tune, Finnegan's Wake?
Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake.
Right, where I think it was a beer was at his head and whiskey was at his feet. That is actually based, if you stand across the street from James's Gate, there's a distillery and a brewery. And that's what they're talking about. His house would have been located right there. The beer was at his head and whiskey at his feet. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Thanks, Tom. Hey, again, thank you, Thomas. Next week.
I just wanted to point out we don't have to discuss what I'm drinking if you don't want to.
No. What
I
you
just wanted to point out I'm drinking it in an independent spirits expo.
Nice.
Yeah.
No longer associated, but it was my creation. Thank you very much. And I'm supporting young Colin Keegan, the Geordie, who now lives in New Mexico at Santa Fe Spirits.
Fine whiskey.
Buy this, support him, support all the small little local guys. They really need your help right now. So if you can buy a bottle, excellent. If not, order a t-shirt or something else directly from the distillery. It really helps them. Next week, we have Brendan McCarran. That's more Irish. Brendan McCarran. Oh, we got Brendan McCarran coming all the way over from Scotland, talking about Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. Yeah, there should be a little registration. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Right on top of Liz's head. So yes, we'll be here, same bat time, same bat channel. Buy Lou's books, they're right there. And even if you're just like a homemaker or you're just a guy staying at home, hire Liz to distill something for you.
Not in your home.
Yeah,
Just
get a
What's wrong with
license.
that at all?
Get a license first. All right. And then
get a DSP, and then we'll talk.
she'll tell you what you need. And I'm like, Karen. All right. Bye, kids. Everyone
Thanks,
have a
Tom.
good one.
Thank you.
Tom. Good to see you.
Cheers, guys.
There it goes.
Right if you get work.